everyone. Thanks for joining. So me and Halima today are going to be talking about common experimentation mistakes that hinder growth. So just some quick introductions. My name's Holly. I'm a customer success manager at ABTasty. ABTasty is a global optimization company that helps brands build better user experiences quickly with our experimentation, personalization, and feature management platform. So I'm working with companies, our clients, to build and implement their experimentation and growth strategies. And I'm here with one of my favorite clients, Halima. Halima, if you want to give a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Halima. I'm the digital optimization lead here at Pets at Home, and I basically manage our optimization program for the company. And yeah, I work with Holly very closely. So yeah.
Perfect. So just to go over what we're talking about today, we're going to talk about three different topics, all about common experimentation mistakes. So the first is why A/B testing, multivariate testing, and rapid iteration is key for growth. The second are the common mistakes that growth marketers commonly face. And the third is how to build a structure for rapid experimentation, especially as you scale up into a larger organization. So we'll get going. So for the first one, Halima, I see that you always have so many tests running, normally about 30 at a time, ranging from complex tests to quite quick win tests, as well as personalizations. So I can tell that there's a constant learning process for you, whether it's learning how to increase your revenue, your average order value, or if it's also avoiding putting things live to 100% of your audience that could have a negative impact on the company. So how do you make it work with such fast-paced testing?
So I think for us, obviously, it's really important to, continuously improve our site, obviously, because the digital standards and consumer standards continue to grow. So obviously for us to be able to A/B test and learn from that is really crucial, so we can optimize our key user journeys. So the way that we really make it work, to be fair, is we have a lot of experiences, but we actually make sure they don't conflict. And the way we sort of do that is quite clever with the targeting in ABTasty and our different segments. So for example, you might be on Pets at Home, but you might only see a specific test if you're shopping, for example, let's say dog and cat food only. And then if you're on another experience, for example, you're shopping flea treatments, you might be in a different test spot. So there's lots of different areas on our site where we're testing and they don't conflict. And, if they ever do, we can always exclude campaigns from each other, which is really good. So for us, I think we're quite lucky that we can have lots of tests running where they don't essentially conflict. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any examples of your rapid testing that led to some good growth?
Yeah, I think the best example I can give is our pet protection. So we offer a flea subscription basically for our customers that own dogs and cats, and basically we had an existing user journey on Pets at Home. However, obviously from the data we could see there was lots of problems with that experience. So essentially we did lots of testing on that user journey, lots of iterations, and essentially we created a new experience off the learnings from the testing that we did, that actually went live, I'm going to say the second week of lockdown. And from that from the changes that we've made, we've saw a really big increase in obviously our signups for our pet protection. So I think that's probably a really good one that we've done.
Okay, awesome. And you did mention lockdown, so I do have to ask, and we'll just cover it super briefly, but how did you make it work, or how are you making it work with COVID?
Obviously with COVID now, lots more people obviously shopping online, and for their day-to-day needs. Obviously I think the digital sort of presence has become even more important than it has before. So for us really, I think it's really stressed how important it is, and how so we're basically really working on making our online journey and our sort of e-commerce really smooth, and yeah, just making it work really seamlessly. So yeah, it's become a really big focus than it was before. So yeah, all positives, to be fair.
Yeah, that's really good. So we'll just move on to the next one, and then there are some polls that we'll get to the results in a bit. So moving on to the second topic, the main one. So what are the common mistakes and pitfalls that a lot of growth marketers face and make? So I think it's really easy to fall into a trap of looking at what other people do and really expecting it to work for you. But in reality, optimization is really personal to your particular site, company, and brand. So something that works for someone won't necessarily work for someone else or for yourself. So what do you think are the most common mistakes when it comes to conversion rate optimization?
I think the first one for me has to be revenue. So I feel like we fail to understand the difference between a primary metric uplift and actual conversion uplift. And what I mean by that is, obviously, experimentation is all about learning, isn't it? So obviously, we're trying to learn something from it. So you know, not every test you do is you're not gonna see a direct impact of revenue in that test. For example, you might have a test where your primary metric is, for example, let's increase add to bag rate, and you might see let's say a 10% increase in add to bag rate, but you might not actually see people go on to convert, and that's because it's too further down the funnel and it's not going to be a direct impact of that test. So where I feel like we fail sometimes is we give revenue too much exposure, we think too much about it. So yeah, I feel like that's something that we need to maybe stop doing and try and avoid. So yeah.
Okay, but that's so difficult though, because so many e-commerce websites have that as their main goal and their primary focus. So how do you manage that?
So I think, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Like, revenue is important and I totally understand it, and everybody wants to see a return on investment. Obviously, even I myself is something that we want to see, but I think there's a difference. So personally, I try and avoid touching on it. Like if I've got a test and yeah, we've got a revenue uplift, great, I'll shout about it, why not? But if not, it's okay. Like the experiments that we're running, we're trying to learn something from them. So it's okay if there's not a revenue uplift. Without doing that experiment, you're not gonna know from the results what you're not gonna be able to learn that experience without testing it. And then I think another thing is, if you're if your client or your brand or company is new to optimization and you're actually the person setting that process and standards, then I would really recommend avoid talking about revenue. So personally, I just try to avoid talking about it. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. So aside from revenue then, how do you go about reading the data that you get from your campaigns?
So I predominantly use ABTasty. Obviously, we use the results dashboard for our results. If you want to delve into a bit more of our data, we'll use GA and Content Square. But to be fair, we try not to focus so much on the solution and actually listen to what the results are telling us. Like I previously mentioned, obviously experimentation is all about learning. So yeah, if something doesn't go the way we want it to go, it's okay. And I feel like a lot of product owners are really focused on a solution that even if it doesn't work, they still go ahead and do it. So yeah, we just really listen to what our results are telling us. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. That's good to know. So aside from your results, what else do you think doesn't work when it comes to testing?
So I've got a couple, to be fair. So I think the first one has to be redesigns, where where companies just redesign something and they don't test it. I feel like we need to move away from that mindset of just redesigning something and not actually testing it. By redesigning something, you're not going to be able to see obviously what impact that has on your customer. You're not going to learn anything from it. Whereas obviously, my best advice would be to constantly improve your site through small experiments and optimizations. So yeah, you can actually see what impact that's having. And all the time that I feel like you're not testing or optimizing your site and you're just doing a redesign in the back, you're probably losing some sort of revenue or even just learning, you're losing that insight. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think another one for me has to be relying too much on the testing tool. So obviously I'm all about using the tools to obviously promote your experiences and your 100% variations. That's something I do, and I'm not against that. But where I feel like sometimes I know how hard it can be to get stuff in a dev backlog, but sometimes I feel like we don't try hard enough to try and get stuff built on site. Obviously the whole point of experimenting is obviously to get that running variation on site. And essentially you'll see some e-commerce sites out there who'll have their site hosted by like an A/B testing tool, which is okay because obviously you're relying on the tool, which is great. But then at the same time, I feel like it needs to be built, and we need to really work harder on trying to get stuff obviously built live on site. Although I know it can be hard. So yeah. And then the last one for me has to be stopping tests too early. You start a test and obviously it hits significance in, let's say, 2 to 3 days, and instead a lot of people just pause it, but I'm kind of really against that. I think you should leave your experience at least running for like 14 days, because you might start your experience, for example, on a Monday and it hits significance by Thursday, let's say, but you haven't actually been able to see how your experience is over the weekend, for example, when it might be more your peak time. So you don't know how your results are going to fluctuate. So yeah, I'd really recommend don't pause your experience as soon as it hits significance, and let it run and get the data that you need from it. So
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So we did run a poll for everyone at the beginning of the session, and a lot of you voted, so thank you. And we did ask how long you normally run your test for. So the majority of people do run it for 2 weeks, and I would say that's kind of standard. Obviously, it completely depends on each individual person, each individual site, because it does depend on the traffic. So a lot of you did say 2 weeks. 5 days, yeah, could be good when if you have enough traffic. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So speaking of hitting significance, how do you plan your testing roadmap and strategy to avoid the pitfalls that we've spoken about?
Yeah. I think the first thing is not having a strategy and testing just anything is probably going to be your biggest mistake or pitfall that you're probably going to face. So, try to make sure you have one. And I think the way we go about doing it is obviously based on our customer insight. So, make sure you're gathering that customer research. So from so for example, you use stuff like Hotjar, Content Square, the results that we get from our ABTasty results feed into that, but even internally. So for example, our customers might tell our customer service team something, and that's something that is passed on to us, for example. So I think really focus on a data-driven experimentation program, but make sure you're testing data-driven hypotheses and not just copying ASOS, for example. Make sure it's actually stuff that matters to your customers. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And while we're still on the topic, before we move on to our third and final one, what is there anything else that you want to mention when it comes to common mistakes and also good things to remember?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last one for me has to be don't work in a silo. I'd really recommend working with other teams across the business. So work with the teams, find out what their KPIs are, and work with them on an experimentation program. I think there's a lot of misconception that people think experimentation and optimization is just that one team, or just working on it by yourself sort of thing. But I'd really recommend working with other teams. I think it's the best advice I can give on how to grow experimentation across your business as well. So for example, at Pets at Home, I work with a lot of our teams in the business, but some of the tests that we've done. So for example, I've worked with our pet plan team who offer insurance for pets. And we've done a test where on the landing page where we tried to get more people to click through and get a quote. And we saw like a 16% increase on that in that test. And then another test that we did was So we have our acquisition team. So obviously, you know, we have our paid search, and, you know, customers come in and they usually land on a PDP, and, you know, most people bounce. So obviously, how do we encourage people to continue browsing, and, you know, not lose that money essentially that we're putting into paid search? So a test that we did was putting our recommendations above the fold, so that those users that did come from paid search, if they didn't like the product that they were looking at, for example, let's say dog beds, then essentially we'd be showing them more dog beds, and that would encourage them to browse. And from that test, we saw like a 4.6% increase in people adding to bag from the recs. So yeah, so if you're not already working with your teams, I'd really, really recommend it, and I'm sure you'll get something out of it if you're not already doing it. But yeah, that'd probably be my like best advice.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So we'll just move on to the next and final topic. So building a process and structure made for rapid experimentation, especially when it comes to scaling up into a larger organization. So you did mention just now that you involve other teams in your work, which I think is a really important takeaway. But in such a big company like Pets at Home, it must be super difficult to manage everyone's expectations and requests and stick to the process and structure that you as the expert have decided on and are working on. So why is it important to have a proper process in place?
I think it's really important because without a process, you're gonna struggle to obviously gain the velocity and the speed, and, you know, achieve a higher success rate in your optimization efforts. So I think it's really important to have that. But equally, I think it's really important to have a really good tool that you can manage your experimentation program. I mean, that's really key for me personally. So yeah, I mean, personally, I use something called Airtable. So I'm not sure how many of you have heard of that, but that's something that I would really recommend using. So yes, I think a key tool is really important in obviously creating your process. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then, so when it comes to building a process, what advice can you give everyone?
So my first advice would be make sure your metrics and your sort of experimentation program aligns to your wider business goals. A lot of the time, I think people just test anything. And for example, let's say your company or business has a business goal to increase VIP signups. How does your experimentation program fit into that? Because yeah, you could just test anything, but the way you're actually going to be able to show or grow experimentation and demonstrate the value of it is actually through making sure it relates to your business goals. So I'd really encourage you to make sure that you're working on stuff that matters to the business. Obviously, if there's a problem with your customer journey, then I'm not saying ignore that. Obviously, that's equally important, but that's probably the second part to it is so firstly, make sure you're aligned to your business goals and what they are. Make sure your experimentation program fits into that. Then the second one is make sure you're always carrying out customer research and having that data so that you're actually testing stuff and looking for areas of experimentation optimization. Is probably the second bit, and they sort of go together. So once you've got your areas of experimentation optimization, after that, I would sort of processy things that I would do is create your experimentation backlog. So this is essentially going to be like a list of things that you're going to now work on and prioritize. So let's say your basket, for example, has a high abandonment rate. So you might have an experiment backlog on all the things that you're going to do to improve that. And that might be one of your areas of optimization. And then the other thing that I would really recommend is create an experiment document. So this is something that obviously just entails everything about your hypotheses essentially. And it's something that you can like send out to everybody. There's two ways you can do it. I'll touch on the second one in a second. But yeah, it's an experiment doc that you can also do. I think the process bit in actually trying to create a process is when your tests go live, have some sort of so we do something called go live emails. I'm not sure how many of you actually do this, but essentially it's sending out an email to those that it matters. I mean, if you want to send it out to your whole business, you can. Obviously, Pets Home is quite big, so we kind of send it to our digital team and all the people that obviously know that it needs what's going on the live site, essentially. But in the go live email, we'll basically have some screenshots, videos, a bit of supporting data, why the test is going live. And it just creates that process of obviously, hey, this is what we're doing. And then essentially once your test has run, we obviously document all of that. So I mentioned obviously having an experiment document. This is quite I don't know how many of you have seen these, but they're quite wordy. And instead I use something, so we create packs, just using Google Slides, to be fair. And in this pack, essentially, once our test has run, we'll create a pack with like everything in it. So this is quite visual as well. So it'll have like data from our Hotjar, it'll have heat maps, all the supporting data in there. It'll have obviously the experience in itself, and then we'll conclude it with the results. So all the people that get the go live email, essentially once we've concluded that test, we then create this pack and we send it out to everybody again. And so then again, it comes back to process. They've seen this test on live and here's how it performed essentially. So obviously that's just to people within like our digital team. But then what I would really recommend is doing like monthly and quarterly packs. So this is the same sort of thing, but another pack, but it's everything that you run in that month or in that quarter, for example. So so I think if your experimentation program is involving your business goals, and this is something that I would send to the whole of your business. This is where your key stakeholders, your exec team people are going to see the work that's being done. And obviously, I think if you can show in them packs the work that relates to your business goals. So let's say we had a business goal to increase VIP signups. Now we've done a series of tests on that area. In this pack, talk about that and send it out, and everybody will see actually, oh yeah, and this is what we're doing. And it brings in that buy-in. So I'd really recommend obviously doing these monthly, quarterly packs. Obviously, I think it's really important to share your wins, but not only your wins, your failures as well, to the wider business. And I'm sure you've all heard that like a million times before. But just really involve other teams. But yeah, there's sort of my advice on like how to create a process. So like sort of in each sort of scenario, you're always outputting something to everybody. But yeah, I think that's how you're going to build a successful experimentation sort of program. But that's what works for me. So yeah,
I think that's super interesting, because I mean, a lot of people, they get really caught up, obviously, because it is a very kind of time consuming process to run an experimentation roadmap. So I think it's quite difficult to remember to share the results with other people and what you're doing, because I think as well, maybe sometimes people in the company can get just kind of forget that it's important what you're doing, and actually you are increasing the revenue for the company as a whole. So it is really important. So that's awesome. We did also run a poll just now about how many of you have an experimentation roadmap at the moment, and the majority of you answered no. So obviously that's totally fine. Maybe now you've got some tips and tricks from Halima on how to run an experimentation roadmap. So maybe you can create one. But I work with quite a few companies, and it is interesting to see the divide between who has one and who doesn't. Sometimes people have a really strict roadmap, and then others like to keep it flexible. So like you said as well, it's not one kind of thing fits all. It is also important for it to stay flexible for you. So that's perfect. So now we've got some time for questions, which is awesome. So we'll just go for the Q&A. I'll see if I can open it. Okay, so we've got the question that we thought would come. So what has been your best test?
For me, my best test has got to be it's actually a personalization sort of test that we've done. I've done it in the past. So basically it's all about we know what our customers shop on our site. So we know what specific brands they shop. So the experience basically was when they come back onto, so obviously they shop with us, they shop certain brands. So when they come back to our site, we essentially serve them like an experience which had the brand names in it, and basically asked them to shop via that. So I think from the data, it was obviously we saw that there's customers that they only shop these specific brands and they don't shop anything else. So how can we make it easy when they come back to our site? So essentially all it was serving that experience, and we saw a really nice, that's probably one of my best tests where I actually saw a really nice increase in revenue. And yeah, so far it's probably my best test that I've done. And it's probably because of the revenue increase that I saw on it, which sounds really contradictory what I said. But yeah, that's probably my best one. But I have a couple to be fair, but yeah, that's probably my best one.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say you do run so many tests that you probably do have like quite a wide variety of tests to choose from. If you want, you can give us another you can give us another one.
Yeah, I can do. So another one that I've done is, so basically, we see that a lot of people add stuff to their basket, but then they don't convert, so they don't actually ever enter checkout. So the hypothesis was, how do I get more people to get back into the basket and essentially check out? So the experience was, again, when a returning customer comes back, we basically save their basket, and we display their basket on prompt when they land back on at Pets at Home. So essentially it would have all the products in their bag. Obviously, if they had like more than like several products, we wouldn't show it all, but that was a base experience. And it was kind of like, and CTA was obviously, view your basket and check out. That test was really good in obviously seeing people actually getting through to the basket and checking out. And we saw a really nice increase in revenue in that test as well. And yeah, that was a really good test, and obviously getting people through that funnel where we were initially struggling with. So yeah, I think that's a really good one. That's all that we've done.
Yeah, that was a good one. Okay, we've also got another interesting question here. It's what should be the experimentation strategy when a website's traffic is really low? So I know that's not one of the issues or the things that you face, but do you have any advice?
I think even if your website traffic is really low, that doesn't mean you can't optimize it. There's always going to be areas where you can still optimize your site. So I wouldn't worry so much about traffic. Yeah, obviously with the low traffic, you're not going to hit significance as quick, and you might have to wait ages, but you're still going to be able to see from the results what impact that is having. So I wouldn't let that, get in the way of not testing something. So I would still really encourage you to get that data. Again, that data might be really low, but yeah, I think it purely depends on what your site might be, because obviously there's lots of areas of e-commerce, isn't there? So I don't know what specific site you might have. But yeah, I wouldn't let your low traffic be disencourage you. I would still continue to create a strategy, because there's probably stuff that you can still do, and hopefully your traffic will increase essentially. So
Yeah, I think it's easy when you have low traffic or lower traffic than you would like to kind of think that maybe experimentation won't work for you, and there's just no point in doing it, and you might as well wait until you've got more traffic. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that's true. I think it will just probably take a little bit longer than you would like, but it's still definitely important to continue running those tests and personalizations and just getting that data back, and then continuing.
yeah.
So we've also got another question. Is there any proven process or approach to setting goals for a growth experimentation test?
I'm not sure about a proven process. I think, a lot of companies work in different ways. The way we do something at Pets at Home might not be the same with another client, for example, Holly, you might have. But I think setting goals and trying to grow your experimentation program, I think it just comes back to my point of it needs to really be based off your customer insights and what they are like. What is it you're trying to do? Whatever that goal might be, I'd work on a series of optimizations against that goal. That's how I would personally do it. And I just prioritize the ones that you think are going to have the most sort of impact essentially. But yeah, that's how I sort of would do it. I don't know about you, Holly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know again about a proven process. I think if there was one, that would be good, and please share it with us. But I think when it comes to creating tests and then setting goals for those tests, I mean, for me personally, I like to have a lot of goals and just collect a lot of data, because if you don't have those goals while you're running the test, then you might as well, when you're coming to reading the results and getting the data and coming up with new ideas, you might think that you wished you had measured other goals that you didn't. So I think it's just important to have quite a wide variety of goals when you're running experiments, just because they might come in handy later. Again, we touched on revenue before, how it's important not to focus on revenue, and how it is important to see like the wider picture, just to make sure that you're not focusing on one particular thing. And then, okay, we've got a few more questions. So one of them is, so one of the most commonly discussed A/B testing mistakes is not having a valid hypothesis. That's true. What approach or steps can I take to frame a valid hypothesis? So Halima, I'm not sure how you phrase or how you work with your hypothesis before you run any experiments and build that process. Is that something that you do?
So I think with the hypothesis, there needs to be actually a valid outcome of it. I think a lot of times some people will just want to test something, but it's like, what do you want to achieve from it? So I think when you're trying to answer that, I would say, what's your metric going to be? Like, how are you going to measure that test, essentially? So I think it kind of, let me just read the question again. What approach or steps can I take to frame a valid hypothesis? Not a valid hypothesis. Yeah, I think it just depends on what the goal is for me. I don't know if I have that problem of not having a valid hypothesis. I think as long as it's something that we can accurately measure with the results, and we're able to see it's something that we're going to be able to measure, and there is a control. I think that's another thing that's really important, is actually having a control as well, because a lot of time you might do an experiment, but there's actually no control. So some people might say, is that valid? Because essentially there's no control, is there? But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that one, Holly.
Yeah, for me, when it comes to kind of wording a hypothesis, I think it's important to ask a lot of questions. So like you said, what do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve it? So what the actual experiment is going to be, and then also where. So it's also important to identify on your site where you want to run the test, and yeah, like I said, how, what, why is also important. You just need to ask those questions, and when you answer those questions, then you'll find, I think, that your hypothesis has actually formed itself.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then a final question before we run out of time. So are there instances where split tests or multivariate tests do more harm than good? If yes, what is the workaround to avoid those?
I'm going to let you answer that one.
Fair enough. So we didn't really touch on multivariate tests that much. Personally, I don't run a lot of multivariate tests, just because they do tend to take longer to get some valid results. I don't think they do more harm than good. To answer the question specifically, I think they are definitely good, especially if you have a lot of ideas about one particular element or one particular thing on your page, on your site, that you do want to test. And if you have tons of ideas that you just want to get out there and run quickly, like we were talking about rapid iteration, then you might as well run a multivariate test. When it comes to split testing, if you are in a company that does like to create different landing pages, which is obviously really cool, then it is good to also run a split test. But we did also touch on redesigns, complete site redesigns, and how it is important to test those. So I think that definitely doesn't do more harm than good if you do want to run a split test of a redesign or of a landing page or of a whole site, then it is definitely important to test it. And if it loses, it's quite easy to think of it as wasted time, when it's not actually wasted time. It's someone could have easily put that live to 100%, and then you could have lost a lot of revenue, a lot of potential leads and conversions. So no, I think they don't do more harm than good. I think they're definitely good, but it's just important to keep in mind that it probably will take longer than your average A/B test. So that is all the questions. So thank you so much for attending this session. We hope that you learned something when it comes to common mistakes and pitfalls, and can now go and grow and experiment.